Hello and welcome to the latest in our series of webcasts ahead of the independence referendum. Today, our guest in the studio is Liz Cameron, Chief Executive of the Scottish Chambers of Commerce, which represents the interests of some 11,000 businesses across Scotland. Good afternoon. Thanks very much for coming to speak to us. Now, lots of questions for you today. Let's start off with a rather basic one. First of all, just to give people an idea of who you are and where you come from. How did you get started off in the world of business?
I've got quite an interesting and diverse path to have achieved where I'm sitting at today. Originally, when I did leave school, I went to college and started off my career in an engineering company in training and development. Then moved on to an international marketing company that manufactured ladies' apparel. And that gave me quite an insight into the world in terms of exporting. And then I discovered that I have a specific talent in setting up start-up companies. And not only setting them up, I enjoy running businesses, developing the business, growing the business, and making certain that we remain in business in terms of our profitability. So that's really where I had an interesting stepstone in terms of getting to where I'm at today. I've been in this position now for coming up for 8 years. Thoroughly enjoy it. It takes me to all different parts of Scotland and indeed the UK, and we've more recently started up an international group within Scottish Chambers, so we are developing trading links with some of our European and global chambers in India and in China. So it's a wonderful position and I'm exceptionally honoured to actually be doing it.
And what about your background in politics?
I've no background in politics, let me just be clear about that. What I do as part of my job in this position and in previous positions is I influence political parties, hopefully, to make certain that their policies are in line with what business needs, rather than developing a policy that perhaps is putting business in an uncompetitive position. So that's my engagement and interaction with our wonderful politicians from all political parties.
Now, of course, that brings us to our first question from our first viewer, Alan Batchelor, talking about your interest in politics. Do you support the case for an independent Scotland?
As far as Liz Cameron is concerned, Liz Cameron doesn't have a view on this issue at all, and I think it'd be very, very wrong for someone in my position to have a firm view. I'm like any other member of the electorate. I will listen, I will be informed and hopefully educated, and I will make my decision on the day the referendum is here.
Now, Alan asked a follow-up question as well. He's talking about if there is an independent Scotland, do you think it could be a more attractive place for inward investors and multinational businesses that is looking to the future if there is an independent Scotland? I
think that's a very difficult position to respond to, a difficult question. I think what is important, though, that as far as business is concerned, we're actually a very adaptable group. We are used to working, as we are right now, in a very unpredictable environment. So we adapt to situations in the same way that we have adapted very, very well, I believe, to a devolved Scotland. And we have identified opportunity in that. And we work very, very well with the Scottish Government and the UK Government in terms of influencing that agenda. So therefore, I think that a lot of the big decisions in terms of policies that will obviously be required to be developed and to be implemented, post-referendum, whichever political party is leading the government at that point in time, I think it's more important to ensure that their policies are firmly focused on how we are going to grow Scottish business, how we are going to realise our strong ambition and our strong confidence to ensure that Scotland is an absolutely right place for business to do business in. Now, a big part of the debate when it comes to business has been about possible uncertainty an independence referendum might cause. This is a question from Gilbert Hall. He's asking, Scotland would require a new MOD with buildings and staff, etc. How much will these changes cost and who would pay for them? I think essentially the nub of his question is business concerned about uncertainty when it comes to this independence debate? I think it's quite important that we actually firmly put a point across, and that is that business is not out there with the referendum centre stage in terms of our decision making right now. And in some cases, businesses are reacting quite differently to questions around the referendum or around independence. I think what's been good from a business point of view is the fact that we managed to get clarity recently in terms of the question, the date, and the information coming forward. That's more important for the business community. So I think that as a business is used to operating in an unpredictable environment, the referendum, I think it's important we get the balance right in terms of the media and in terms of the policies that's being driven right now in the Scottish Government. We've got to get the balance that we've still got businesses to run. We are still operating in a very fragile economy. So therefore, what's more important to us in the next 17 months is to ensure that the cost base and that there is no, less unpredictability as we possibly can manage in terms of running our businesses right now. That's what our main focus is, and I think it's important that politicians from all political parties and all governments understand that what we're looking for right now is to ensure that their time and their resource is focused on ensuring that we can operate successful businesses here in Scotland.
It's been a key point of this debate, hasn't it? The Prime Minister was critical of the Scottish Government for having the independence referendum because it caused uncertainty. The Scottish Government was critical of the Prime Minister for having the referendum in Europe because then, of course, it caused uncertainty. But I suppose businesses are always happy to operate with a degree of uncertainty, aren't they? Because that's probably the natural state.
In an ideal world, from a business point of view, can we deal with shocks in the system? The banking crisis is probably a perfect example of an absolute shock to the global system. We have dealt with that, and it's been very, very painful for businesses across the globe. But here in Scotland, we've dealt with it, we've remodelled our businesses, and we are moving on. So I think it's important that we get the referendum into a proper business perspective. It's going to happen, the electorate will decide. Our job in Scottish Chambers and indeed the business community is to ensure that we continue to operate successful businesses and stay in business, creating real jobs and real wealth here in Scotland.
Now, when it comes to the independence referendum, a key business argument is what kind of currency we might have in an independent Scotland. Lance Haworth asked what currency would you like? The euro with virtually no power to influence policy, that's A. B, the pound with no power to influence policy, or C, the Scottish groat with total power to influence policy, but a very small currency that could be swamped at any time by the vagaries of the markets?
Well, I think we'll put option C to the side. This is a point that's been raised by a number of businesses across Scotland in terms of views and aspirations being raised in terms of the currency. The ideal at this point in time for the majority of the business community would be that we retain sterling. That would cause us less work, less need to change our systems. So that would probably be the ideal. That said, I know that there are a lot of implications around that, and that would be obviously, if we retain the sterling in terms of our currency, what effect would that have? Does that mean that the Bank of England will continue to manage our system, to manage our fiscal regime? There's lots of other questions around that, but if you're asking if the viewer is asking the basic question of ideal, the preference would be we stay as we are, because that would have cost implications for business. So therefore, that's the one of least resistance. But business, at the end of the day, we are used to dealing with a number of different currencies in terms of, particularly our export market. So, whatever the currency is, we will work with governments to ensure that it's bedded in, and also the fact that it enables the cost base for our exports in particular to be positioned in the right way.
You'll deal with it essentially, but from Andrew Grant, he's asking if there is a yes vote, should Scotland change currency to the euro directly from the pound? You were really kind of answering that question there, but I suppose the euro has just seen such some tremendous problems in the past couple of years. Obviously it has, and obviously I think that the situation with Cyprus is not a position that any country would like to be placed in. I think that one of the benefits of our EU membership as the United Kingdom has been that we have managed to negotiate and manage a number of opt-out clauses which have been more business friendly than others. So I think it's important that if we are going to change currency and if we are going to consider, we have got to be in possession of all the relevant facts in front of us at that point in time. And I said the driving force must be
what is it going to do for business and to business? And that should be the driving. If it's going to make our cost base more expensive, that's a big concern for business right now, and that's going to be our main concern in all of the aspects of an independent Scotland or not. We've got to stick to the economic policies and ensuring that the environment, and by that I'm talking about fiscal regime and the regulatory regime, is right for us. Let's not get too hung up too quickly on creating a bigger problem. Let's stick to the basic common sense approach of the economy.
We're speaking about the regulatory regime. That's our next question. We've seen a lot of that in the news this week. The FSA has been abolished, replaced by two new authorities. Kathleen Espy, I'll just paraphrase her question to say, what could financial regulation look like in an independent Scotland? And you mentioned the Bank of England there. Do you think there could be some Bank of England involvement in financial regulation in an independent Scotland?
I think that's actually a very good point to raise, because a lot of these very, very critical questions, i.e. the currency, the EU membership, the role or otherwise of the Bank of England, the one difficulty we're facing is all of these big ticket items, big ticket questions cannot be answered until after the referendum, because a lot of this is about negotiation between, if the electorate said, okay, we want an independent Scotland, that negotiation will then, that's a trigger for the negotiation to take place between the Scottish Government and obviously the UK Government. So therefore, a lot of this is in some cases a wish list from some political parties. In other cases, and that's one of the difficulties, business is actually going to have to deal with that post-referendum, whatever that change is. So I think that we need to just get that into perspective, because we will have, and I'm not an economist by any manner of means, we've got work being done by the UK Treasury and also the Scottish Government civil servants looking at all of these options as we speak. So let's wait and see what the information that's going to be coming out to business and to the wider electorate in the next 17 months is really quite important to help inform all of us the pros and cons of either a unionist situation or an independent Scotland.
Let's look at another big issue that business is always worried about, tax. A question from C. Byrne. It's quite specific. He's a micro business owner, and he's got a worry about the new PAYE RTI. That's the real-time software, I think, for paying employees' taxes. Let's broaden that out slightly and see, how do you think a Scottish revenue could operate in an independent Scotland?
I'm not an expert in that either, but a Scottish revenue at the end of the day, if we are deciding that we're going to be separating the tax infrastructure and the resources associated with that, then that is something that will happen. Will it cause? It potentially could cost the public purse more money, which means the taxpayers, for you and I and others. And I think that needs to be considered very carefully in terms of what is the cost-benefit analysis of separating a system like tax or like a fiscal regime. If it's going to, and I'm coming back to the benefit for business and the electorate in Scotland, if it's going to create benefits for us, yes, let's do it. If it's not, then we need to consider very carefully, because if it's going to increase the cost base for Scottish business, that's not healthy in the current environment, and it's certainly not going to contribute towards growing the small and medium-sized businesses in particular, which make up 98% of all our businesses here in Scotland. We have got to take that into consideration, and I would hope that all political parties and different camps are considering that very, very carefully. But that's part of, it's quite interesting, we're having events all over Scotland right now through our network, and we are actually becoming more educated and more informed, because these are the sort of questions that we are asking. We're not necessarily getting all the answers yet.
Right, OK. Now, we've got another question on the economy from Bill Wardle. He's talking about Scotland being an open economy, although it receives some protection from the UK. Essentially, the nub of his question is, does independence equal vulnerability?
Another interesting question. Your viewers must have been up early this morning. I don't agree that volatility, the size of a country necessarily determines that its it's volatility. Let me just say that first of all. I think it's important that in terms of Scotland as a country, as a devolved country right now, we've been very, very successful in terms of realising of our ambitions. We've been very, very successful in terms of our industry sectors across the globe. That will continue, a post-referendum or pre-referendum, and that's what I'm saying. We must ensure that our aspirations, our expectations, and our job creation continues. So I think that, if the electorate determine that we are becoming an independent country, we will adapt to suit that. We will adapt to that constitutional change, and I do not believe that it makes it any more volatile or not, whether we are independent or part of a bigger cake.
Now, another big issue for business, we've seen this debate over the past few weeks, has been oil when it comes to the oil money. Here's a question from Cameron McAndrew. Whether it's 5 years, 30 years or 50 years, what will Scotland do when the oil runs out?
I think I've heard that statement in several occasions. If you look at Scotland being, let me look at it as a business model for a moment. Yes, it's made up, and our income is made up from a variety of different sectors. We have benefited greatly from the oil and gas sector. Currently over 200,000 jobs are created through that sector. So it's important the sector is supported through fiscal and legislative regimes from UK government and the Scottish government as much as possible. But it's like any business model. We have got to be starting to look at the future in 10, 15, 20, 50 years' time. What is our economy going to look like? Now, we're already growing our life science sector. We're already identified as a centre of excellence for our gaming industry. We're already identified and our exports are growing for our food and drink. This is about diversification in an economy, and it's oil and gas and renewable energy is coming to the fore. There's lots of different parts of our economy that are now beginning to be developed, and that's good because I think it's important that we do not rely on the one sector of our economy. We should have learned that when we're talking about our financial services sector, which is still a very important part of Scotland's economy, but we have got to diversify that. I would like to see more in the manufacturing sector in areas where we can absolutely compete across the globe. We've got a lot of successes, so again, let's not get too tied up with what we're going to do when the oil runs out. I don't even want to have that discussion.
Now, in the past 3 weeks or so, the Scottish Government have actually predicted a new oil boom for Scotland in the future. Of course, Better Together, on the other hand, have been warning about relying on the volatility of the oil price. Here's a question from Connor on the Isle of Skye. How do you think the impending oil boom in the South Atlantic, around the Falklands, may affect the economy of Scotland? So that's a specific question, but let's broaden it out slightly to, if there's an oil boom there, that could mean volatility, and let's focus on that volatile point.
Yes, it could mean volatility, but I've got to say that it also could mean a massive opportunity for the skills we have here in Scotland in terms of transferring those skills to other parts of the globe. And I think that that's quite important, that Scotland needs to be thinking more in an outward way. It's not that we are wanting to retain everything we have here in Scotland. I see that as an opportunity for our skill base. I see that as an opportunity for us to grow our businesses, not as a volatility issue at all. Now,
let's look at our final question of the day. Quite a tough one in a way. Brian Lawson, and it kind of maybe refers to what we were speaking just at the beginning of our discussion. Why do you lack the self-confidence both in yourself and your fellow Scottish businessmen and women to back self-government for Scotland? Are you just not up to the mark, he says?
What a wonderful question to finish on. First and foremost, I think I'm probably one of the most, as an individual, one of the most confident business leaders here in Scotland, and have been commented and endorsed as such. So therefore, neither Liz Cameron, nor indeed Scottish Chambers of Commerce, nor indeed our business community lack confidence in any form or manner. So let me just make that point to Brian, whom I happen to know. Second issue, this is not about a confidence issue. This is about we are actually a representative business organisation, and our business members have got very diverse views in terms of their political views on an independent Scotland or otherwise It'd be absolutely very, very wrong for a business organisation like us to be taking a firm view. What we will do and what we are doing is that we are making certain that we are asking all of the relevant questions of both camps, and we'll continue to do that. Secondly, a big issue for us is that let's get the debate around the independent Scotland centred on economic policies. So my message back to all of the political parties is make certain you are developing and listening to the business community in terms of what's important for us. And what's important for us is that we have got a transport infrastructure that connects us to the rest of the world, that we have got a skill base that makes it possible for us to continue to grow our businesses, and that we've got an environment that's good for Scotland, that's going to make Scotland grow and to achieve all of the ambitions that we as Scots are very ambitious about.
Liz Cameron, very good to hear your thoughts and opinions today. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So that's all we've got time for just now, but remember, for more news and background analysis, click on the BBC Scotland News website, Scotland's Future section. We'll be back with another guest in a couple of weeks. Goodbye for now.